So looking at the funding, and then we'll talk about social movements too. We brought these up. Every time there's a new exposure to government, how much they get in our lives, there are social movements typically attached to it. And because of that, you now have more entry points. And all of these led to an increase in interest groups. I'm sure you can think about the interest groups attached to the environment, Sierra Club, Environmental Defense Fund, feminism, League of Women Voters, National Organization of Women, anything related to the feminist movement creates an additional interest group. And then it's buddied up with an opposing group. So these movements push those forward. And when we need lobbying, litigation, electioneering, and going public, you need money. So these right here kind of break down where the money comes from. Obviously, we have our dues. That's typically sending out the forms. The NRA just sends mail. Look, we've got this bill coming up. We need more money. So people who are in the NRA are worried that they're going to lose some rights, so they send in more money. And that's sort of how they go about that. You see the commercials. Now direct mail's kind of shifted to commercials too. I mean, those puppy commercials with the sad eyes with Sarah McLachlan singing in the background. Oh, so sad.
My dog said, look, they have it worse.
Exactly. Yes, they have it worse. I say that to my dog all the time. I mean, if he wasn't ours, he wouldn't be around probably. He is. Ufer is something. But, okay, that's number 3. It's the elicitation of money. Then the federal grants and projects. AAA focuses on what? No, AARP focuses on old people. AAA, well, I guess not a lot of you drive, so driving, automobiles, okay? So roadside assistance, that sort of thing. They might be given a contract by the government to go test a new seatbelt. What are the implications of this on travel? So then they have a whole bunch of money at their disposal to get support to test out the new idea on seatbelts and go from there. Then foundation grants, similar idea. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They are a huge, huge donor to a specific cause. Anybody know what I'm getting at? What they spend a lot of money on? Education, which is kind of weird because, what do they have to do with education? But they spend a lot of money on education, and a lot of it goes to interest groups, and they then do the research. They do the implementation of lesson plans, and mainly curriculum. It's not like specific lesson plans, but trying to do technology and stuff like that, which is a very good thing, and the interest groups use it. Yeah?
Didn't they make a website for free education to college kids or something like that?
Melinda Gates, the foundation did? That sounds really familiar. And I for some reason, when you said that, I immediately thought of biology and chemistry. So I don't know if it's a specific thing for, I don't know why I just thought of that all of a sudden, but yeah, I feel like I have heard that. Tabitha, why don't you check that for us? Okay. Next, we've talked about this quite a bit, and I hope you kind of understand how big of a concern it could be. You work next to, and we'll use the one right now that Donald Trump's trying to address. You work right now next to the president. How much influence do you have on the president's decisions? Well, not right now. I mean, for the last 8 years, not the lame duck status. The last 8 years, you're the first person they probably see. And before they go to bed, after their family goes to bed, you're probably the last person. You have constant influence on the president. So then you leave your government job and then you get a high-paying, cushy lobbying job. That's kind of shady. And then the serious scenarios that we looked at, or I guess we talked about, with, let's say, tobacco. You work for the government, and the tobacco companies really want to get rid of these public smoking bans and say that they're unconstitutional as a violation of free speech, freedom of expression to smoke in public, whatever. And you have somebody who works for, or let's say works for the Department of Health and Human Safety. So a tobacco company goes and talks to him and says, look, if you help get rid of this smoking ban, as soon as you're done, you're going to get a pretty high paying job. And it's not that blatant, but it occurs very frequently. They have put in some restrictions on it where, depending on what your job is, you have to take a break for a year before you can go become a lobbyist, or maybe 2 years, whatever. But the one that Donald Trump is focused on is the White House staff doesn't really have any type of limitation. So it is a concern, huge conflict of interest, and there's not a very good way of addressing it.
So if you get out of government, where do you go for like a year if you have a restriction?
You get paid pretty well just because you worked for the government in terms of, let's say, speeches, appearances. So if you were to be a representative, it'd be a little bit harder because there are so many. But a senator probably can go to different fundraisers and get paid. I don't know exactly, but I'd guess like $5,000 an appearance type thing.
Would you still be able to make the same income that you were before?
Same, like if I'm a senator, I take a year off. Like how much would I make? Probably, depending on what you do. And I mean, these people most politicians are independently wealthy anyway. I mean, they're independently wealthy by being lawyers, or their families are wealthy. So they're probably pretty taken care of. And then they also get the same benefits for life, like health and stuff like that. So they're pretty well taken care of anyway. So the income isn't necessarily a focus unless it's a big increase, which is where the lobbying comes in. So we're kind of just closing with attitudes of interest groups and then looking at regulations with them. But it's difficult for me to give you just a list of interest groups. I mean, that's not going to be effective. There are some that are really big. The NRA I've referenced a lot. The UAW is a big one. ACLU, AARP. Those are big ones. Sierra Club. It's hard and difficult for me to kind of push you and talk about all of them. Knowing more of what they do, I think we've done a pretty good job, or you have done a pretty good job of recognizing just how many there are. And that's really a big part of it, more so than knowing the specific ones, because there really are so many. And this is where we were talking yesterday with what they do. So that was the NAACP. Okay, so looking at this, think of the NAACP. What does that group stand for? And that's going to play a pretty big part of civil rights too. So the NAACP stands for what? The acronym. Yep, the acronym.
National Association of Basketball.
There we go. So their focus then is the advancement of legislation for minority groups. So the potential group then, the people who might benefit, is anybody in this country who is a minority. But the actual group is much smaller. The people who actually join, that's a much, much smaller group where they still get to benefit even though they don't join, that collective good. And because of that, we run into a little bit of a problem, and that would be kind of a free rider problem. Where why do you join? Why would you join the NAACP? If they're just going to do it for you anyway, why are you going to join? I mean, think of the NRA. If you like guns, the NRA is a pretty powerful group. You don't have to give them $20. You're still going to benefit from them protecting the Second Amendment. So why would you do it? What do those groups then have to do to try to address that free rider problem? What do they have to do? To give you some incentive. Make it a club. I mean, the solidarity incentive. Or give you a material incentive. They have to do something to make it so you want to join. Because the NAACP can't limit it to just members if there's a law. The NRA can't just pass a law that anybody who's a member of the NRA gets to carry a gun. Those aren't possible scenarios. So they do have to figure out a way to make sure that the people want to join. And I mean, it's pretty apparent to think like the NAACP, NRA, UAW is a little different because you have to belong to, see the benefits. But the bigger it is, the more free riders you're going to get because the more influential you are. And for some people, you think of the Sierra Club focuses on the environment. Well, if you like the environment, you might benefit and not join, but that doesn't mean you don't care. So a little bit different than the NAACP or NRA with that in mind. Okay, we're towards the end now. So just looking at the types of groups, why small groups can work, why big groups work, who has an advantage with money. Small groups, I mean, it's easy to maintain what you're supposed to do. You're focused. Think about the NAACP. Okay, the NAACP. What is their goal? And I'm not saying what we said over here with improving the lives of minorities. What is the goal of the NAACP? I mean, what should they do? Help what? Okay, but how are you going to do that? Protect their civil rights and stuff. Anything else that we could do to improve the lives of minorities? Pass new laws. Okay, anybody else? Noah? Change the culture. I mean, it's a huge group. Do minorities in Detroit have the same issues as minorities in Alabama? It's too big. It's too big to have a collective focus. The vague goal is the same, but how you go about that is much, much different. Where small groups can kind of deal with that a little bit better. So kind of think about it like that. Everybody is sort of going in the same direction. NAACP, you might all be kind of going sort of the same way, but you want to get to the same end point, just you might be going different routes, where the smaller the group, be able to get a little bit more focused. Then we look at the resources. We look at the impact. The small groups that have a huge impact are single issue groups. So if you were to think about I'm thinking about gay marriage. If you were to have a gay marriage interest, pro-gay marriage interest group, as opposed to an LGBT rights group, which one would be more effective in terms of achieving a specific goal? What? A pro-gay marriage interest group as opposed to an LGBT rights interest group, which one could be more effective? You're agreeing on where your resources are going to go in the pro-gay marriage interest group. It's a narrow focus, so every piece of money you have is going in one direction. LGBT rights, that is extremely vague because there are a lot of, LGBT is a very encompassing group, and it covers things that some people in that same community disagree with. So it's extremely broad and difficult to kind of pursue certain things. So much different there in terms of what you can do. But those emotional issues, pro-life groups, parades, marches, rallies, they're very specific, emotional topics. So what type of strategy is going to work right here for them the most? Ben, what do you think? What strategy is going to work the most? We had our 4. Which one's going to work the best for a pro-life interest group? Litigation? With it being so emotional, going public. And that has been, probably the biggest. Now, litigation is a fallout from that, I would say, from going public. But you kind of have to kind of start it first. All right, now, the money side, we're not going to spend much here just because I think that you're probably pretty aware of what I'm getting at. It's not a trade for a vote. It's not a bribe. Although maybe you get a cushy private jet down to the Caribbean and things change. I don't know. It's not a bribe. It's a meeting. Right, Ilya? A family meeting. A family meeting.
With your second family.
With your second family, yes. But it makes sense. I mean, if you are a business, you have more resources. A business interest group, sorry. The financial side of that, you have more money. The American Dental Association, a little bit of wealth. American Medical Association, a little bit of wealth. I mean, even the laborers, the American, I don't know exactly what it is, but the Plumbers Association, I can't think of the acronym. They have a little bit of wealth, but when you have a little bit of trouble getting people to join, that's when your resources go down and your influence is less. All right, last spot here. This is talking about our regulations. Now, just like campaign donations, the biggest issue with regulating a lobbyist is, well, I'm a lobbyist. Shouldn't I be able to have free speech? The problem is, what do lobbyists do? I mean, what is their whole goal? Not somebody. To convince somebody in Congress. So what you have then is a person who is not elected by the people having a direct impact on government. And that's why it's a concern. That's why it's not free speech, because the wealthier you are, the more of an advantage you have as a lobbyist. So it's not a protected form of free speech. There are some parts that are, but it also can be regulated because people say that those individuals are not elected and they can't be directly entangled with all of those representatives and members of the Senate without dealing with First Amendment issues. So a couple of them, and I've asked you as you go through there's an insert that kind of labels them a little bit better for your questions. But originally, this law, the 1946 one, it basically just asked you to register as a lobbyist if you were a lobbyist. So there's no way to check and make you do it. I mean, I'm not a lobbyist. I just like to donate millions of dollars for people to go with their second family. And what then that means is people weren't doing it. There was really no point in it. And if you look at it, it took 50 years. Using your thoughts, and probably Olivia here, because she's already admitted how negative and untrustworthy she is. Why did it take 50 years to come up with this law or to adjust the law? Because the lobbyists didn't want it to pass. I mean, they were lobbying against the law that hurt them. I mean, that makes sense. So it took that long for Congress to just say, no, I'm sorry, this is going to have to change. So they have to report, and it's based on hours. It's based on how much time do you actually spend talking to representatives, how much money is related there, and you have to register as a lobbyist. And every time you spend money on a dinner, on a private jet business meeting, whatever, you have to list those and then report it. So it's regulated. And while people take advantage of it, sure, they still have to report it. And there are regulations. And because of that, they are able to monitor the influence. It doesn't prevent it, but it monitors it, which is the transparency is kind of a big part of that. Last little bit, we already know, PACs. What happened in 1970s with PACs? They were regulated. So then we have an increase. Then 2002. What happened in 2002 with the campaign finance? Ban soft money. So the regulations continue to be adjusted. Nothing's perfect, but we're getting there. And